Pause.
I can just edit it out because remember we couldn't work out
That's
why
right.
the fuck it won't pause,
That's right. All right.
which is yeah.
So I am going to open up with two current affair things.
Yeah.
Because I want to briefly discuss this Katamu purchase
Yeah.
because I think it segues us in for another pod soon in regards to the whole NZ roasted versus NZ owned thing. And then we're going to bring it back a little bit closer to home and you can talk a little bit about what you're up to.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
that is now relevant. You have announced it to your customers. This pod doesn't come out for another week, so that brings you like 10 days out from the launch. So I think it'll be a really good opportunity.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right.
That
3,
makes sense.
2,
Go.
Welcome back to the Course Grind. I'm Ethan, and I'm here with Paul. How are you, mate?
Wonderful.
So it's been a couple of weeks, I think, since we actually managed to get a recording in.
Yeah, life can get in the way.
Life seems to do that to us a bit, eh?
It does a little bit, but we're all about quality over quantity. I can't actually hear you, bro.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can now.
Look, I just discovered in this that my microphone, the flat surface on the top of it, is actually a big, gigantic button that allows me to pause, mute the mic. That's clever. Not clever when you're recording and you press it. So it's been a couple of weeks since we managed to get a recording in, and it's good to be back.
Absolutely.
So I think before we jump into it, I don't know if you saw today. I think it was posted today. I only saw it today anyway. People's Coffee has been acquired by Katamu.
Yeah, that's very fresh. I saw that pop up a couple of hours ago, actually, which interesting.
It is interesting. I think I was having a good think on it, and I think usually we see larger companies acquiring smaller companies. That's generally what happens in business. I don't know a huge amount about People's or Katamu. I know both companies, but I don't know a huge amount of them. My understanding is that People's is a bigger company than Katamu, and please, somebody out there, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm more than happy to be wrong on that one. So it is quite, from my perspective and that viewpoint, it is quite interesting to see what I'd call a smaller player picking up a player that's bigger than them.
Yeah.
I also think it's quite interesting timing in the coffee market, especially in the Wellington area, because through a little bit of digging recently, and I was not a stalker, I was looking at for a different reason here, I discovered that it seems the founder of Dark Horse Coffee has also sold his shares out. And he sold his shares out to those he brought on a few years ago. So it seems to be a bit of a shake-up happening in the Wellington area.
And in coffee in general, like, is it Andrew from Coffee Supreme?
Andrew Lowe, yes.
Coming back to that, and I think it was him that said, I know it's been somewhere that we've interacted recently about how going forward to keep coffee profitable, you do end up with that economy of scale. Some of the smaller guys arguably need to be brought out by the bigger guys to amalgamate, make some of these arguably smaller businesses profitable. It's a big can of worms that we're not going to go all the way down the road of here, but it is really interesting, that dynamic, and again, becomes of this whether they continue as separate entities or whether they do become a premium and I don't want to say commodity because that does both brands a disservice, but a two-tiered type situation like other brands that I'm not actually going to name because I think
it's great for Katamu. I think it gives them options. And a lot of props to both Katamu and Peoples and to their owners. I mean, it's not easy being in business, and it definitely hasn't been an easy last 5 or 7 years. And so I think it's good to see change and it's good to see growth. And Peoples wouldn't have been on the market if the owner wasn't ready to move on to a new project, I would say. And Katamu were obviously in a position to say, hey, let's expand and let's take this on. So I think it's interesting. And I think, it does give them options to run 2 premium specialty coffees. And it means that in the big picture of things, they can put one into a cafe and then one into the cafe next door. And we see exactly that. But if they, depending on how they decide to do it, they've got the ability to do it. So they've got 2 different levels of specialty coffee going into 2 different places right next to each other. So I think that's pretty exciting, and I think we should watch the space here.
Absolutely.
Speaking of watching spaces, I hear a little rumor there's some things happening down in Wanganui, Paul.
Yeah. I was thinking in terms of watching spaces. Yeah, I've spent a little bit of time screaming into the abyss.
Yeah, well, I hear that you've decided to go onto a pedal boat, you know?
Well, kind of.
Your own little coffee walker?
Yeah, so you've had a relatively long association with the crew at the paddle steamer Waimario in Wanganui, and I suppose a couple of must have been. So actually, in the process of launching Derelict, I were approached about helping them set up a coffee bar in the Wanganui Riverboat Museum to, again, bring more people in, share a bit more of the history of the Wanganui Riverboat service from the turn of last century. And so that's evolved slowly. Been helping them run a space in there for 18 months. And recently, yeah, after staring into the void, screaming into the abyss, trying to break everything and watch the world burn, I decided that playing Tetris with ducks is just really not where it's at. Like,
That's an interesting way to put it, dude.
well, it is. It is the clusterfuck that it sounds like, and that's what I realised, that with all of my ideas that I tend to act upon, I've just ended up with a few too many things going on. So, with the Village Snob, which is where I originated in coffee, through to starting Derelict now, with this being a little bit of a focus, and of course running Naporo, our coffee bar in the Riverboat Museum, and other side projects that are uncoffee related. We've got way too much on the go, and that means that things suffer. And so ultimately, I've culled one of my ducks to allow me the time to focus on the Derelict brand, because again, I've said right from the beginning with the Village Snob, if you diversify, you become average at everything. And I came to the understanding, you know what? I'm not able to do all of these things the justice that I want to do to them, and certainly not able to fulfill my goals or even my obligations to my wholesale clients if I'm trying to split my time too much. And so making the big move, closing the Village Snob after nearly 10 years, that's a massive call, because as much as it's not something that I would say, but plenty of other people have said, is that it's iconic. And so,
Bit of
again, closing the
nostalgia
business,
there.
what's that?
Bit of nostalgia.
Yeah, like, it's one of those things. It's very hard to close a business that is working. It's not because it's not working. But I started that business in 16 with some pretty solid goals, and some of them I haven't been able to tick off. And one of those was moving out of a card after 3 years. After nearly 10, we're doing it. So that's exciting. A complete change of structure, but also means that I can continue to do some of the things that I've always wanted to do. And again, it's aimed at providing a bit more of the cafe experience for the Derelict brand at the moment, while helping the good mates down there to develop their space as well. So nothing like a good collaboration.
No, and I think it's important to point out to our listeners that, you know, both of us, we're solopreneurs. We don't have a staff, we don't have a team around us, so to speak. We are in it on our own. So, you know, when we take on a new project or a new challenge or anything, it's all us. So we are the many hats that run our business. And so the fact that you've been juggling that many projects for a while is commendable. I'm glad to hear you're going to slow down a little bit.
No.
Slow down in the number of projects, hopefully pick up in the number of coffees.
No, it's probably just nesting season for the ducks, so there'll be a few more new ones pop up as soon as I create a little bit of space.
Yeah, just keep an eye out for that goose, mate.
Because anyone who's followed the journey to what has become Derelict knows there's been a lot of shenanigans and things in the coffee space, and so I don't imagine that changing anytime soon. It's just, again, do justice to what I'm doing now to really be able to provide the quality and the end goal of what I want out of that brand for both myself and for my customers who are using it in their cafe. Like, if you can't support people, then you're really not doing anyone any favours. And so, sort of take one for the team, I guess.
Oh, very good, mate. Hey, so there's been something that's been a bit of a bugbear, I think, for you for a little bit. And I think that's been thrown into today's podcast. And I actually did a little bit of homework and a little bit of planning for this one. So I hope you're ready, because you said to me last night that you want to talk about this. You got a lot to talk about, and I told you to fight me on it. So, you know,
well,
I'm ready for a good fight, bro.
It's interesting. This is a topic that came up, and I was approached by one of the journalists for one of the subsidiaries of Perfect Daily Grind, I believe, for my thoughts on this topic. And then not too long after that, I entered Derelict into a into a competition, and one of the questions came up about sustainability. And so I answered that honestly with my thoughts, and my thoughts that I had put out to this interview and were in print, not what they wanted to hear. And so my application would have gone immediately into the rubbish because,
That's not very sustainable.
well, hey, that's on them, not me. Personally, I would have recycled it, or just read the application on a digital platform, and then there was zero waste. But that's another story.
But
Then we can also look at how that energy was produced and otherwise. It is a big wormhole, and I think that's exactly where we're going today with
I think it is.
the wormhole of not so much sustainability as a broad topic, but cups and packaging.
Yeah, and I think this the conversation for us started in regards to packaging itself. I think cups is an important thing to throw in there because cups is the thing that gets put in the spotlight all the time. But it's really a conversation about, the packaging that your coffee's coming in. Is it compostable? Is it recyclable? Is it just generic? And does it really matter? Big scheme of things, does it actually matter? And I think we have, I think we have an understanding of a view here, but I think we've also got very different angles that we come at it from, and different perspectives there as well.
Can I just throw a bit of a spoiler alert in here and say that certainly from my perspective is I have absolutely no intention of trying to solve this problem here today on this podcast. I'm more so putting it out there to, some may argue, watch the world burn, but more so, I'm a big believer that you'll never change the world by insisting you're right. You'll do it by making people question their beliefs.
And for me, I'm a big believer that it doesn't really matter. To me, it doesn't really matter whether you believe in global warming, climate change, or any of the other aspects. We could sit here and we could argue that left, right, and centre all day long. But to me, I believe we have a responsibility to do better. I believe that we have a responsibility
Absolutely.
to leave the planet better than how we arrived, which doesn't seem to be working in the big scheme of things necessarily, but that doesn't mean that we're exempt from our responsibility to do so.
Absolutely.
So, first quick fire question for both of us here. As of this current point in time, is your coffee packaging compostable or recyclable?
No.
Neither. Are you looking at that as a potential move in the next 18?
Well, that's interesting. And this is exactly one of the questions that was asked of me. And I said, I will make no bold claims because I feel that packaging needs to be a issue that is led by the packaging industry, not the coffee industry. We're experts in coffee, not packaging. And one of the biggest things with so many things that I would throw under the umbrella of virtue signaling is unintended consequences, because something seems really great and we get attached to that idea, but don't have the capacity, be it time, be it training, be it knowing where to look, to understand the implications of some of these things.
I see. I would. So my response to that is actually yes. We are looking at a potential move in the next 18 months. We actually looked at doing it last year, but things didn't align. And we do have our reasons for doing so. We dragged our feet a little bit on this because of the aspect that I'm not looking to make a change in packaging for the sake of making a change.
Yes.
So I'm taking a lot of time to really focus on what I'm trying to accomplish in that, why I'm trying to accomplish, what my story behind doing so is, and my reason. Because to me, it's not a marketing aspect. It's about core values. I think we've got access to multiple different products in New Zealand globally. No, we don't currently use a sustainable packaging. And yes, I hear what you're saying, that it's the packaging company. They're the ones that make packaging. We make coffee, so it's their responsibility. But at the same time, I feel it's also our responsibility to make a change. It's our responsibility to identify if that's something that's important to our business and to our core values. But I don't believe in changing for the sake of changing.
No.
I do want to say, so as a business, we've gone through 3 iterations of packaging in the last 9 years. We started with the classic deep pack with window, the brown paper tin dye bags with a plastic window in it. Then we moved to, there was a New Zealand company. I actually think you brought some stuff for them as well for your advent calendars back when you were running the subscription box.
Yeah, so I've worked with Ember, who, what the hell's their trading name? Not EcoWare.
No.
They're based in Hamilton. They do home compostable packaging, which is great, which is great. Don't get me wrong. And I launched with their bags, which were a curbside recyclable bag. The aesthetic, again, had I been able to get craft, I potentially would have gone with that. But they also didn't do a box bottom bag, so therefore it inhibits the way the product displays. So there are so many things involved in the way that you consider packaging. And so, and again,
I'm sorry. I'm going to cut you off there just so I can finish
yeah,
where I'm going with this before we get lost in translation. So we used that product for a while
yeah,
for our retail packaging. We moved
iconic.
back. Iconic, that's the one. And we moved back to deep pack, but just without the windows this time. And we made that move strategically when we did our full rebrand, new logo, new colors, everything. So we've used a compostable product before. So what I want to be clear up front here in this is that I do not agree with a compostable coffee bag.
No,
I agree 100% in support. Well, it's not that I do not agree with it. I do agree with it if that's the avenue you use or whatnot. That's fine. It's not an avenue we're going to take again. I do agree with a curbside recyclable bag or a paper bag. And the reason I don't agree with a compostable bag or aren't going to use a compostable bag is one, care factor from the end user. Composting something is so much harder for them to do than throwing something into a curbside recycling. And one of the biggest things that was said to me in the last couple of years by a small business owner here that they had keg milk, they did milk and kegs, was that sustainability has to be easy for you. If doing sustainable actions is not easy for you, you will not stick to it. You will not make the effort to do it. So providing composting bag, it's great. It sounds good for your business, but the end user is not necessarily going to do that. It takes less thinking for them to throw into a curbside recycling. The catch of that is, I'll get to in a minute, there's a lot of legislation regulations that you actually need to be aware of. But we'll get to that one in a second. Sorry. Iconic. Box bottom
yeah,
bags.
yeah. But no, I agree with you with the compostable. It's not that straightforward. I've in the past had experience before starting Derelict with many iterations of bag. With the subscription, I'd worked over 4.5 years with over 20 New Zealand roasters. So there's a wide variety of iterations of bags and the evolution of bags, even the same roasters evolving through bags as they were finding the best solution for what they were doing or what they felt was the best at the time for their needs. And it is really interesting. And again, with the compostable bags, I used to take all of my compostable bags that I were using, and I were using a number of them from one of the roasters that I was working with, and I would shred them and put them into my home compost. You had to remove the one-way valve off the back, etc., etc. Parts of them didn't compost. Again, Trade Aid with their chocolate they no longer produce used to do it in home compostable bags. If you didn't shred it and you put it into your home compost, it wouldn't compost.
Yeah. I
It's
think it's important
unintended
to
consequences. I experimented with a lot of these things over the time because, don't get me wrong, I am very, very big on trying to leave the world better than what we found it, despite some of my comments that I do make. And again, anyone who follows some of my side projects will know that I spend a lot of time actually picking up a lot of rubbish in the wilderness because I don't want to see this shit out in the world.
composting in itself is not as simple as just throwing your waste into a bucket, right?
No,
There's actually a ratio. There is a science behind this.
very
And
much
so
so.
you actually have to have for when they test these things to determine whether they meet regulation for compostable, whether it be commercial or home, it's at certain temperatures and it's at certain percentage of like waste to organic matter as well. So
Yes,
put in perspective, and this delves us a little bit into the cup conversation here as well, is compostable cups that you get takeaway cups, they're fantastic, right? But it's also who takes them.
yes.
Because they're not gonna break down in the landfill. They do break down in the landfill better than rubbish that doesn't break down,
No, they
but the
don't.
process is a hell of a lot slower, so it's not counted as composting.
That
But
can I?
I look at our local composting complex, fantastic guys, and as far as I know, they've stopped taking compostable food and beverage packaging because the ratio of earth to cup or organic matter to cup that they need, they cannot keep up because there is a ratio of how much organic matter is needed to break that one cup down.
Can I just jump in with that landfill thing? And it may not still be around, but it was on, if I believe correctly, Innocent Packaging, which became rebranded as Decent. One of the big packaging companies, and this is a few years ago, and I remember having this discussion with a few people about it, they had done core samples at a landfill. And in those core samples were carrots that still looked edible after 20 years. Because there is no oxygen, the way that modern landfills are done, they do not break down. And so that is the problem. They do not break down at landfill. Your cups do not break down. And I believe, from conversations back then as well, is that the problem becomes that these compostable products actually create more methane when they go into a landfill than if they were composted. So and this is what I was alluding to previously with unintended consequences. Things that, I guess that is my entire issue with it being led by people like us and businesses who are trying to do the right thing, businesses who are trying to look like they're doing the right thing but using it as greenwashing, which we've talked about before. That's a whole nother conversation. But it's that by not being an expert and having an opinion but something that's not peer reviewed, not able to be verified with the emotion removed, we run the risk of actually doing more harm than good. And that is my concern, why I've said I will not make big claims about it.
I think it's important. Like, to me, I think it's important to be able to make claims. If you're doing something and you're doing something good, I think it's important to actually be able to say, hey, this is what we are doing. That gives buyer confidence. I think to do it just in a general setting, I mean, would you do the actions that you are doing as a business if you couldn't market it on social media? That to me is what it comes down to, right? So it's right back to that core values aspect. So if you're doing all this, environmental that, whatever, and posting it all over social media, would you still actually be doing that as a business if you couldn't? Because the reality is being sustainable costs. Yes. Being sustainable costs money. Yes. All right. Sustainable packaging versus non-sustainable packaging, 9 times out of 10, costs more money. Yes. So would you still be doing this if you couldn't market it?
Absolutely.
And that's what, to me, that's what it comes down to, because it speaks to your core values as a business. So this is a huge part of why I prefer recyclable, because I find the recyclable aspects of it so much easier. It doesn't really matter as much if you throw it into the landfill as opposed to recycling it. But the idea of chucking into curbside recycling is so much more simple. So Coffee Supreme back, I want to say 5 years, might have been more, might have been less, made the big change. Deep Pack brought out a Recycle Me paper bag, and Coffee Supreme led the way with that, which was phenomenal. To me, was phenomenal. Unfortunately, New Zealand has this thing where we like changing the rules every 2 fucking minutes. And I'm pretty pissy about this, and I'm going to go into a side tangent in a second. But because of that, the Deep Pack Recycle Me bags are technically no longer curbside recyclable because the standards have been changed. So you have to start looking, okay, if the end user isn't going to recycle this product or isn't going to compost this product, right, that's the in-life aspect of this product. What about the starting point?
Yes.
When New Zealand banned the plastic bag, there was a whole lot of studies done or conversations had, and I haven't delved deep into it, but there was comparatives done of the plastic bag versus the paper bag. The plastic bag itself, yes, was far more detrimental in the in-life process. Far more detrimental than the paper bag. But in the pre-life process and the creation of that paper bag, it used more resources and more energy to create than a plastic bag did. Ergo, it wasn't actually that much more sustainable.
And this is again one of my points. The unintended consequences. B, and I have a cynical outlook on things. That's quite clear. Again, are these things known and people are turning a blind eye to it? And so when this whole plastic bag thing came up, and I'm glad you brought this up, I had the conversation with someone who we both know and had a lot to do with. Hi, if you're watching, you know who you are. And I remember saying to her after the ban, do you have statistics on how much of an increase there has been on the sale of bin liners?
Oh, I now know who you're talking about.
After the banning of
plastic bags. It's not who I thought you were talking about.
And her response to me was, fuck off, don't talk to me. Which, that there is the unintended consequence I'm talking about. Like, Hey, banning plastic bags, I understand that when they get into waterways, they do horrible things. I completely appreciate that. Aside from that, what have we achieved?
I think the reason I brought the plastic bag conversation into it is because I think we look at things from such a narrow minded perspective. So we look at this item in its current in its use process, and then its end of life process. That's all we look at. We don't look at the creation of this product.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important thing to do. And so, like, I look at the deep pack bags, for example. So, Coffee Supreme, they've actually got on their website, they've talked about the aspect that, they are unfortunately no longer curbside recyclable because, so it was 2021 they made the move, but that's no longer curbside recyclable because of changes in regulations in New Zealand. However, these bags still use significantly less plastic and are made from a much more sustainable paper. Coffee Supreme are a big company that can make bold claims, and they're a big company that know that if they're going to make bold claims, they have to have their facts right.
Absolutely. I'm not.
So they would have done the work to ensure that that is correct, and which is great because that actually paves the way for smaller businesses who don't have that ability to necessarily back themselves as much or spend that amount of money to make sure that they can make sure this information is correct. It gives them the ability to sort of follow through. The change in regulations in New Zealand is a big issue because
Yes.
it seems to be a fluctuating thing. Now, I was speaking to a rep for one of the oat milk companies. I'm not going to say who they are. Over the oat milk that I use, and it is a New Zealand oat milk, and it is produced just down the road from where we are, basically. And they were saying that she was saying they'd done a lot of work in getting the sleeve that goes onto their 1 litre plastic bottles to
Yeah.
meet standards to be recyclable. They spent a lot of work doing that, and they got there just for regulations to change again and it become non-recyclable.
And that's
So as a business, it makes it difficult to try and do good when the government keeps changing the goalposts.
and that's the thing. And that again does bring me right back to what I was saying. And again, certainly when I've said about making bold claims and so on, I'm by no means taking shots at people, which is unusual for me. But it is more so a case of I could make these claims, but again, I'm only one person running my business. I don't have a marketing team. I do not have a team who have qualifications or experience in that field. And so, unfortunately, as a small business, I do
You
have to
do have a
leave
lawyer on
behind.
speed dial, though.
Yeah, yeah, but I do have to take a lot of cues from some of the bigger players and what's going on and the conversations that are happening. And it's the same thing with, as I say to people, why my accountant is part of a very big company rather than a small one man band who may be cheaper. Their company has people who their entire thing is to keep up with new government regulations, distill it down to him that this is your specialist area of business. These are the regulations you need to know. That's the thing. And so again, they are these regulations that we could spend so much time trying to navigate for the government to change. And again, if you're moving into like printed packaging, you've got to buy so many units as soon as you change one thing, because again, it's labeling requirements and all those kinds of things. There are so many factors at play here. And let's be honest, all these costs get passed on to the end consumer. One way or another, they get passed on to the end consumer. That is the problem. Coffee
And they
Supreme
have to.
packaging, when it became obsolete, and again, I don't mean to continually name them because it's certainly not our intention to pick on them, but
I'm quite happy naming them because I was really like I did a little jump of joy when I found out their change of packaging because it was the mindset that I had at the time as well. So I think
yeah, but
I'm
what
a
I
supreme
mean,
I'm a supreme fanboy if you can't tell.
yeah, no, as I say, I've got a lot of respect for what they've done. So again, as soon as you've got to rebrand or change your packaging, you've either got obsolete product or product that's not meeting your claim. So either way, you've got a loss that has to be passed on. If you're a big company and you're trying to stay ahead of the game, which ideally you need to, you've got waste there. Do you continue for the next 6 to 12 months with that
But
packaging stock, or do you write it off?
but
Because
again, it's not as simple as that though either, is it? Because it's not just about stock waste; it's about
no,
time. Because now
yeah,
you've got to spend the time and the effort to research and find another viable product. If the decision is to continue down that path and try and find something, You've got to go and
And
find another viable product. It's time,
again,
it's energy, it's money.
you're paying somebody, well, at least minimum wage to be sitting there and working that out, and all the other considerations that go with that. It becomes, and again, we're going slightly off topic, but that becomes a massive expense to business. And again, the changing of the regulations to improve things, again, it's unintended consequences. Those things come back to suddenly the packaging manufacturer, if they were a New Zealand manufacturer, they're probably a relatively small business. Suddenly, okay, our packaging is no longer relevant. Do we have to make modifications to our machine? Therefore, we've got to get the investment on that back. And suddenly, everything that comes through, and this isn't just coffee related, but again, this is where the hot topic at the moment of the cost of living comes in. Every action has a subsequent equal and opposite reaction. The cost of everything continues to come up. But we've gone on for a bit of a tangent, so we'll go back to the recycling of things, because again, one of the hot options for some of the big players has been the soft plastic recyclable bags,
Which
again,
I think is a fantastic thing that you've actually got soft plastic recycling in New Zealand. And the few times that I go into a supermarket, because if you know me, I don't go into supermarkets.
only to buy your coffee.
I definitely don't go into supermarkets to walk down the coffee aisle to see who's stocking coffee on the supermarket coffee shelf. But one of the big things that it's always full. The soft plastic bin at the supermarket is always full.
Yeah.
All right. But again, it's great to see it being used. The big scheme of things, what percentage of people that are shopping at the supermarket are using it? Because for me, soft plastic recycling, it's not an easy option. I actually don't go into supermarkets because
Yes.
we get click and collect or we get delivery. So it's not an easy option. So I'm
Yes.
not gonna partake in that, right? So my thought process is how many people actually do utilize that.
Yeah. And so if they're not, then it's ending up in landfill.
I think that like what it all comes down to is just trying to do the best that you can.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think businesses like actually have to, regardless of what the end user does, they can't control what the end user does. I mean, look, right? If you sold a bag of coffee to somebody,
Yeah.
all right, you sold them a single origin, you sold them a geisha, all right, you sold somebody a geisha, and then you found out 3 days later that they went home and they used that geisha to make themselves a 16-ounce mocha with 5 sugars and freaking rice milk, you would probably cry a little bit, right?
All the way to the bank.
Or you'd burn the world down. But my point is, you can't control what the end user is going to do.
No.
All you can do is control what you do and what you put out there, and you still wanted to put that geisha out there. And it's that same sort of thing, right? Is that your core value there was to provide an unforgettable coffee, and that's what you did. And our core value when it comes to looking at packaging is to provide the best packaging that you can that's on the market that has the best environmental impact.
And that's the challenge. That is the challenge, because it's not that straightforward. No, I haven't finished with this one.
Oh, here we go.
Because again, what happens with the soft plastic? I know, and I'm not going to name anyone, but I know one of the popular things, and I have questions surrounding this. Again, not claiming to be right, but pointing out unintended consequences, is again them being made into fence posts. One of the issues with plastic, not just plastic packaging as such, but plastic in general, everybody is talking about microplastic. As plastic breaks down with UV and everything else and so on and so forth, these plastic posts are going to be out in the weather for 50 years. We know that anything that has a 5-year or 50-year lifespan, it's not a light switch. It doesn't just one day turn off and it's no longer fit for purpose. It degrades over that time. What are happening to all those microplastics? Are they going into the soil? Again, I've got a background in farm fencing supplies. And so again, posts for vineyards or farmland, when they're driven into the ground by being thumped in by a tractor, you've got abrasives. You're having bits of that plastic rubbed off. It's going to be like a cheese grater. And so then you're going to have plastic in the soil, which is exactly the same issue that people have had with timber posts, because you're going to have the leaching of the treatment. So your CCO, your copper, chromium, arsenic treatment, which again, for 4 kilo per cubic meter. Like again, these are all the issues or the unintended consequences with these things. And so
I think though, you've got the unintended consequences. I mean, there was a period of time where Mexico was building houses out of recycled plastic, right? They're 3D
Yeah,
printing bricks, all right?
yeah,
I think, yeah, you've got the unintended consequences.
yeah.
I think you've got that. The problem is you've got that anyway. And this is where
Oh,
I say,
absolutely.
businesses have just got to do the best that they put out, the best that they possibly can. Because, I mean, if it was between knowing that my coffee packaging was being turned into a fence post that was going to be reused for the next 40 odd years, or be sitting floating in that big pile of rubbish in the middle of the ocean, I know which one I would prefer. I
But
know which one 99% of the population would prefer. And so you can only put your best foot forward.
and that's the thing. It's weighing up all of these options. And again, it's like, well, if we don't produce a plastic bag to begin with, we won't have to worry about, for argument's sake, 70% of it not being recycled. And then,
Put it to a different label here, right? If I was to roast organic coffee and I branded my coffee, and we've had this conversation, so I hope you can see where I'm going to hit you with this one. If I was to roast and sell
right,
organic
yeah,
coffee, organic to a coffee to a cafe, right? And they sold, and then I went into that cafe and I ordered a coffee, and
yeah.
they made me this flat white, and they used non-organic milk, and they told me it was an organic coffee. It's the same concept, right? As the roaster, my core value was to provide an organic product. I did
Yeah.
the best that I possibly could, but I can't control what happens in that next stage. As a buyer, I think it's important to support the companies that are looking at these things. My reason for that, and I'm saying that knowing that right now we do not have a sustainable packaging for our company, and that is something we're working on. But the reason for that is that companies that are working on these things or looking at these things or providing these things are companies that are trying to make the extra effort. They're the
Yes.
ones that are trying to add value. They're the ones that are trying to say, okay, we are in business and we are part of this planet. We have to do the best that we can, regardless of the external factors that we can't control.
And that's it. I guess the point I'm trying to make is, again, it's not that us as small business who, like yourself, haven't made a decision yet. It's a case of, if I make that decision, best of intentions, is it the right decision? It comes down to that paradox of, is it better to make the right decision for the wrong reasons or the wrong decision for the right reasons? Which has the better outcome? I think this a really good way to look at it is, you put all the time into the right packaging solution for you. You order up a good size quantity to make it cost effective so you can make this transition, not have to increase your cost to the end user, and then find actually it wasn't the right decision. It's not like there's new information come out or the regulations are changed and otherwise, and you think, I've spent a lot of time making this mistake, I don't want to let go of it now. That's part of my issue. By no means am I against sustainable options. My point is, we need better guidance from the people who are out there making all of the noise about this stuff.
We need better goalposts. We
Well,
need
that's the
we
thing.
need goalposts that as businesses we can actually work towards without the government coming along and changing it and making it harder for us to do what we're trying to do. Because every time they do it costs us money. And let's be honest, businesses give up.
And
Why try when all your effort is for nothing? So we need the regulations to stop changing. Let them be solid so that we can all work towards that.
And look, don't get me wrong, I understand science evolves and commonly held beliefs can be disproven and so on, but it's one of the, again, it is one of those things that while things are so dynamic and while there's so much emotion around them rather than actual evidence or research, then we've got big problems. So I'm not saying there's not research out there. There is just a lot of things out there that provide hysteria. And again, single-use cups would have been a big thing that I would say there was a lot of hysteria around. I'm not saying they're good, and there's a lot of myths and so on with a lot of these things that won't die. But again, looking the other day, and I'm just going to pull up the details on it here, again, around the single-use cups, that they equated to 0.1% of the total waste in the UK, or 0.7% of the total packaging waste in the UK. And so we end up with these sacrificial lambs, like the plastic bags, that are a huge thing. And I remember saying to one of the, because I'd been quite active with Plastic Free July back in the day, and again done things surrounding that. I believe when I first started, I was also the first, and I think only cafe in Wanganui actually selling reusable cups. And as I said at the time of the banning of plastic bags are all well and good to ban, because there's something that's easy to identify. They are that sacrificial lamb. Said, why don't you? And this was to a sustainability organisation. Said, why don't you go and stand outside the junk store and pick at them about the plastic toy cars that fall apart before you even get them out the door, that can't be recycled. They don't have an
And
end use.
I'd
Why
just
don't
like
you
to
start?
put out there before you guys, some extremist jumps on here and leave some hurtful comments that might really get to me. That device that you've used to write that comment or that social media post or whatnot is full of plastic. That device is full of plastic. Plastic is a part of life. It's in around everything. So unless you're right. Ban phones. Ban
And
phones. There's my new motto for the week, bro. Ban phones.
it is right up there with going out to sea in your inflatable boat wearing a synthetic wetsuit to protest deep sea oil drilling.
Okay, Greta.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Dunning-Kruger effect. So again, I guess you could look at it that is it with some of these things that people simply do not know any better? Therefore, the Dunning-Kruger effect. You think that you know a lot about the packaging and how it works, but you're not quite aware of the things that you don't know to look at. Or is it, in some cases, just that blatant peddling of an agenda?
I mean, look,
Like, best of intentions.
not. I would like to say that 80% of takeaway cups in New Zealand are compostable, right?
Yes.
And that is
How
because
many of
best
them get
intention.
composted? That is the thing, though.
But that is because best intentions. Because let's be honest, compostable cups cost more than non-compostable cups.
Yeah. And, well,
Like as a buyer, what's the best practices you can do? Honestly, there's two fantastic things that you can do here. One, you walk into a cafe with a reusable cup. I'm
yes.
a big believer in the reusable cup. We can get
And
into the
make sure
whole.
the damn thing is clean for your barista. Come on.
Please make sure that the damn thing is clean for your barista. Definitely make sure you can get into the argument of, it's a plastic cup or whatnot. Doesn't matter. Bring in your mug. All right, bring in a mug from the kitchen. Don't care.
Yeah.
Right. I would rather see you bring in a cup than me give you a takeaway cup that I know is going to end up in the bin. That's my reality. The other thing you can do from the bean perspective is bring in a jar.
Yeah.
All right, bring in a jar. Now, buy from your local roaster. Bring in a jar to your local roaster and say, hey, can you fill this? And 95% of the time, they're going to be in a position to do so. Don't ask them on the day that they're being absolutely wiped out of beans and all they've got on is what's on the shelf, because they're not really in a position to make much difference there. You're not going to know whether that's the case or not when you walk in the door. But the reality is that these are little things that you can do that are easy, but the sustainable practices still have to be easy for you. If making sure that you've got a clean keep cup in your cart isn't a practical thing for you, then it is what it is, and that's not where you go. Being sustainable is an imperfect process. You can't be expected to do everything. But when it comes to coffee packaging, if you can make that little step, make that little step. When it comes to your takeaway cup, if you can make that little step, make that little step. I would like to divert slightly here. I want to not throw you under the bus, but I want to throw you a new one here, because I don't know if you picked up me saying I wanted to talk about it when we planned out today's session. And it does fall into the packaging category.
So it probably fell on deaf ears, if I'm honest.
It probably fell on deaf ears. And something a little bit lighter, I suppose. Coffee labels.
Yes.
As a coffee buyer, what should I be looking for on my coffee labels? What's important? And I'm going to say this right now, that our coffee labels at Empire do not meet the standards that I'm about to put to you. Okay. And that was a calculated decision back when we did our rebrand. And it's something that we're actually slowly working on now. I have started changing now as we run low on label stock. We are updating our labels to incorporate these factors, because these factors I think are important. And there was a reason behind that calculated decision. It just didn't work out the way I had intended it, because again, it made it a little bit more complicated for the buyer, so it didn't work out. But yes, so what should actually be on your coffee label? What information do you as a home buyer need to know? What's the number one thing that you can think of right now off the top of your head, Paul?
Origin.
What about with blends?
Origin. Even if it's a blend, and again, I think keeping it really simple at blends, have the origins on it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't by any means expect a roaster to put the percentage of origin, but have the origin on there, and because it's an ingredient, have it in descending order as ingredients are supposed to be.
Or even like, and that can be like, you can go as in depth or out of depth as you want, depending on how protective or unprotective your IP here. When it comes to a blend, it can literally just be the country of origin, right? It doesn't
Yes.
actually need to be in depth here. When it's single origin, if you just give me a bag that just says Colombia, well, that could be bloody anything.
And that's
For all
and
I know,
that,
I'm going to crack that open and there's white powder in it, because the reality is that there's so much variance in Colombia,
and that's the thing. And so with a blend,
it doesn't matter so much.
it needs to have its origins. But again, in blends, more than likely you're going to be using regional lots. And so it could be, like, I know there was a regional lot that I had from Allies for the 15 Shades of South America box. And that was one that I actually wrote a blog about because it was such a phenomenal regional blend. Vermelda Cascavel, something of the sort. But that was made up of 7 different regions from Brazil. And so again, saying that it is a Brazil on the bag, I understand. But if it's a singular region, so it's from a cooperative or that sort of thing, absolutely it needs the country, the region, and I think best practice is to name it after the producer, be that a cooperative, be that a farmer, be that the farm. Some farmers will trade off their name, some off the farm name because the farm name may have more prestige over the years or however.
And I
Those
think when you're a
are
smaller
important.
roaster dealing with
Traceability.
importers,
What's
I
that,
think
sorry?
I think when you're a smaller roaster dealing with importers, it's a lot harder to get down. Not harder, there's a lot you can do traceability here, but it's not as easy to access that information of the direct farm and producers. So it does make it a bit more difficult. But I
Depends
do
on.
think that it is on the roaster to try and provide as much information around that as possible.
So with that, again, I've chosen the importers that I work with based off of with running my subscription prior to roasting. I'd worked with, I believe, all of the importers in New Zealand, and some of them, again, guys that I work with now and girls that I work with now, phenomenal in terms of, hey, what photos, what additional information, is there anything more you can give me? More than happy to give it to you. And so again, because, and this is off on a bit of a tangent, traceability is a game of trust. At our level, it is a game of trust. And again, it comes down to those unintended consequences of, good, for argument's sake, answer some of these random DMs that I get from producing countries and start working and being able to say, hey, I'm doing direct trade, working with a farmer, but do I know what I'm getting? Do I know if I'm actually helping these people or if I'm hindering them? Whereas working with an importer, that is their core business. They are generally based in those in the producing countries, and they generally speaking work within their communities and share their knowledge and training. And so again, I'm alluding to guys like CoffeeNet, who I've had a lot to do with over the years, and their experiments that they've then shared. It's a trust-based system. And again, a lot of the guys that are working in the offices and the warehouses and stuff in New Zealand have come through the ranks of being baristas, roasters, and so on, like we have. They've been our peers or our colleagues. And so you know them as a person as well as you can. So it is a trust-based system. And again, I think this is going to be another conversation we'll come back to surrounding traceability and fair trade and direct trade and all those sorts of things, so I won't go off on too much of a tangent. But going back to the next thing that I would see, we've gone down single origins, processing method.
Okay, so I think like processing method, yes. I think it's as simple as wash, natural, or whatever the other processes that are
Absolutely.
used. All right. I don't think you need to give any more in-depth information there because the general user doesn't really care.
No, you don't.
I don't think for the general user that's a massive piece of information. Somebody that's a little bit more clued on with coffee or more interested in coffee, but the guy that's walking into the supermarket to buy specialty coffee off the shelf probably doesn't care.
No.
It is best practice to have that there, though.
Yes.
The big one that I want to hit, and I'm actually surprised that this wasn't the one you hit, and I want to elaborate a little bit here as well, is tasting notes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And not just tasting notes. And I think this is really, really important, what I'm about to say now, is tasting notes in layman's terms.
Yes.
I cannot tell you the number of packages, and I'm sorry if this is on one of yours. No, I'm not sorry, I'm calling you out here. I cannot tell you the number of times I've seen bergamot as a flavor profile on coffee, and I don't know what the fuck bergamot is. And if I don't know what the fuck bergamot is, somebody who's been in the coffee industry for however long and tasted coffee for however long, if I don't know what that is, then a lot of people aren't going to know what that is. And
Yes.
you are not trying to sell to someone who is pedantic with their finger raised as they're drinking their coffee or their tea. You are
Yep.
trying to sell to a person. So they need to be, who you're trying to sell it to needs to be able to understand what it is that they are buying. Tasting notes in general are perception based. Okay. So
So-
just because I put this on the package doesn't mean that's what you're going to taste, but it gives a starting point for people, right?
And
It needs
that's
to be a
the
starting
thing.
point they can understand.
Absolutely. And so, two things I'm going to say here. Firstly, I remember a while ago, and I quite regularly take the piss out of this, that I had a coffee, and I think it was a Mexican, and one of the tasting notes was dandelion. And I thought, I have no idea what to expect here, because it's been many years since I've recreationally consumed dandelions.
You've obviously not had dandelion tea recently or dandelion coffee
No,
recently because
no.
dandelion coffee is apparently actually a thing. And I'll tell you what, it's fucking horrible. I'm
Look,
sure somebody out there loves it. They probably also have a morning matcha, but dandelion coffee is.
well, yeah, that don't even start me. But the other thing I was going to say, and this has become a bit of a running joke, and I almost had a modified taster's wheel done years ago to kind of address this issue. Stone fruit.
Yes.
Could you be a little more vague? Are we talking plum,
Apricot.
nectarine, apricot, avocado, olive?
Peach is a stone fruit, right?
Yeah, but like
Grape?
I'm gonna be really upset if I'm expecting some nice peach and nectarine notes, and next thing I know, all I can taste is avocado and olive.
You give him that, he's going to head down to the liquor store and buy himself a bottle of schnapps, you know.
Hey, I probably am after this anyway.
But
Like,
but honestly, it's just keep those tasting notes into things that people can understand. And if you want to go if you want to get a little bit more elaborate with it, when you list it on your website, keep it in layman's terms, and then maybe create more specifics. Where if you found things that are like bergamot or dandelion or lavender, say a little bit, create that little bit there. But you need to make it easy for people to buy. The point is to sell the product. The point is to have people drinking your coffee, and that people need to know what they're drinking. The other thing is that, and I don't know if you're like me, all right. And this is one of the things that triggered me that actually we need to redo our packaging, because we get asked all the time, what should I expect from this coffee? And rightfully so, because at the moment our packaging doesn't have tasting notes on it.
yeah,
And the reason why we didn't put it on there is we wanted a clean, crisp labels, and we provided data cards that you could take with your bag of coffee that had all of that information, including like a brew recipe for different types of equipment. All right, that became not too difficult for people, but people didn't adapt to that, and
yeah,
so the data
it
cards didn't
needs
go.
to be
So
simple.
that's why we're making that change. All right, and I've lost the train of thought as to where I was going here now, but buffering. Buffering.
But no, I know what you mean. And with the tasting notes, again, if everything's on a card, it's something that gets lost. It's another step for people to have to consider. And
I remember where I was going with this is that, and I don't know if you're in the same position as I am, and maybe it's just a me thing. When I have somebody walk in and they say, "Well, what's the flavor profile of that? What's the flavor 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 of that?" And I have to suddenly stop and think, yeah, they're my coffees, right?
yeah,
But when I suddenly have to tell you the flavor profiles of 6 or 7 different coffees in a 30-second span, it's not difficult for that to all get muddled up in your head, right? If you come in and say, what's the gatehouse flavor profile? I can tell you what the gatehouse flavor profile is. You come in and say, I want to know about that Papua New Guinea, I can tell you about that. When you come in and say, can you tell me the flavor profile of the India, the Papua New Guinea, and the Tolima? I'm sorry, and that's where having that information right there on the labels makes your life a lot easier as a roaster and as a seller, because it's actually the work being done for you.
yes. And that's the thing. And the other thing that I do, and I don't know if this is a standard practice or not, but I feel that it's helpful to people, is listing the flavour notes in order of perception and the way in which they arrive on the palate. And again, flavour notes can be anything from aromas to flavours to acidities as well. And so they are different. They can be different things. As I say, that's just a personal preference. I like doing it that way. So again, people can, and I've got
Taste
a
it
few
as they
rules
read it.
like that with my range, so that people can identify the coffee as to how it's going to do what it's going to do. And again, I have things like my coffees, my standard single origin range. In fact, both of them, it's a little bit of an evolution, but let's gloss over that. Is color coded to the growing regions on the bean belt, so you can immediately look at the shelf and go, cool, that's green, that's from Asia Pacific. That's blue, that's Africa. Red, it's Central America. Because, again, it's trying to help people understand what coffees they've enjoyed in the past or haven't enjoyed so they can make a better and more easily informed decision. And again, it's recognizing that, hey, I had one of the blue label last time and I loved that. They'll be drawn to the blue again. Well, I had a yellow label and I didn't really enjoy that. So it's little things like that help. And again, that's, I think, why having those flavor notes on there, you can look at something and it's a joke with my circle of coffee people that, and again, it was a coffee that Peoples had that a mate of mine was serving in his cafe that had notes of, and these may have been two separate coffees, but Earl Grey and rhubarb, and they are two things that I absolutely do not enjoy. And it may have been two separate coffees. And so I just could not go near them knowing that those flavour notes were there.
You've just given me a little bit of trauma here. I don't know whether I should share this and whether this is going to get cut out or not, right? So I'm formerly a heavy smoker. That right there should get me kicked off the show. Wife and I quit a few years ago. And in my younger days, so I started smoking when I was 15. And I'll tell you what, that changes your flavour palette, right? And also quitting changes your flavour palette even more. All right, so it's been a really interesting experience over the last few years of the way my palate's changed. Typical teenager smoking, and I remember one day, and I ran out of tobacco. I was in the middle of shift. I won't name the place, but it's another local roasting company. It wasn't Flight. All right, so I've worked for another roasting company in Hawke's Bay previously, and this guy who I knew from a previous job had turned up and was talking to me, and I was sitting there. I was like, feeling a little bit headachy, you know. And he said to me, well, you got papers still, right? I'm like, yeah. You got some filters? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you got an Earl Grey tea bag? I'm like, yeah. He's like, crack it open. Roll yourself a ciggy out of it. He said, it's not going to cure the headaches. It's going to take the edge off. I don't know whether he was serious. And I also don't know whether he expected that I would do this. And I also don't know whether or not I've become more intelligent or wiser as I've gotten older. But I did what he said. And I smoked this Earl Grey. The smell of Earl Grey, mate. I cannot handle the smell of it. The moment somebody mentions it, it brings me straight back to that memory, and it is traumatic. Nonetheless, it didn't stop me from smoking, but it stopped me from ever wanting to talk about Earl Grey again. So please don't put Earl Grey on the label of your coffee.
No, that can just be a surprise. It's all right. The thing that came back to my mind was, and again, it's coffee related. I won't name where it was because they have more money than I do, which is probably most people, so that keeps it pretty broad. But
except for me.
After COVID, when I was trying to get the North Island Coffee Festival going, I had a meeting with my business mentor. And anyway, I tried to support a small cafe, but they'd changed their hours just after COVID. And he said to me, just check and make sure they're open. I'm like, no, they are on these days. And I got out there and they weren't open. So we ended up somewhere else. And to this day, I still cannot get the thought of this coffee out of my head. A small long black that comes out in a flat white cup. Like, there is only one size of long black. So the fact that I had to say small long black tells you all you need to know. But because this gentleman was donating his time and had brought me a coffee, I had to finish it. And I swear this coffee had been filtered through a cactus. The mouthfeel was that bad. Like, it was horrendous. And so that comes back to the tasting note thing is, again, some of these flavors can be like mouthfeel perceptions and so on as well. So I've got a coffee in my range at the moment which has a milk bottles note because it just has that creaminess to it, which is quite wild.
And I think it's important to recognise that, like, it doesn't mean that's what the person's going to taste. All right. So we've picked up a wholesale account a couple of months ago, and I said, look, this is our gatehouse bean. This is what we're going to be providing you because it fits with what you're looking for. They're really happy with that. I said, these are my tasting notes for it. He's like, cool. And then he messaged me a couple of days later, and he's like, I taste bubblegum in this as well. Like, great, real strong grape hubba bubba. And I'm sitting there like, so what? But that was
And
part of the flavor profile that he tasted. He got the base perception of what I provided,
yeah,
but then he could taste something that I didn't pick up. And that could have been because I missed it. That could have been because that was what his palate perceived.
yeah, different.
I think it's important to recognize, and I agree with the way that you've done your tasting notes. I do think it's important to recognize, I think the general practice is sort of majority to minority in flavor. And that's why
Yeah,
more often than not, you'll see dark chocolate or cacao or caramels as the first flavor tones, because that's, in a typical sense, that's what embodies the majority of that flavor, of that coffee, right?
yeah.
And then you get the other one. So it's a declining scale is usually how it seems to be displayed. The last one that I think is critical that I want to add, and roast date is definitely up there, but we've already talked about roast date before, so I don't
Yeah.
want to delve into that. But the last one that I think is critical to add is depth, roast depth. All right. And all it needs to be is light, medium, dark.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't need to be anything more than that for the end user. For
And I'm going
you
to put out
and
there,
for, yep,
I'm going to throw everybody under the bus and call everybody out on this.
bring it, bro.
If you can make it on espresso to a normal recipe, it's omni roast. Fight me.
Well, I'm actually going to hit you back. I'm going to hit you back here because I was actually listening to a podcast on my drive up here. All right.
Like,
And the podcast,
I do need to quantify. I just want to. Yeah, yeah.
great podcast. I haven't finished it. And one of the things that she said, I'm going to hit you with this. One of the things that she said is there is no such thing as a filter roast, and there is no such thing as an espresso roast. So I'm going to leave you with that one.
Well,
You can
funnily
fight
enough,
her on it. I'm stepping out. You know what? My
I,
Papua New Guinea tastes great in espresso and it tastes great in filter. I'm all for it if you want to call it an omni roast. I just think this is the best way that my Papua New Guinea can be
and
served.
absolutely, and as I say, I've called that out because I've seen so many people talking omni roast, omni roast, omni roast, and then you'll have other people that will call filter roast. And the reason I say this, and I do want to do and I will shout out. I may edit this out, but this revelation came to me a few years ago when I was running the subscription and running guests, and I had a Columbia San Bernardo that I was running on espresso. Well, that was my intention. Retailing for $175 a kilo at the time. Yes, I'm a madman. And so I had about 2.5 kilo of this as my single for the week. As
You
my
bought some. You bought some of that Panama the other day, didn't you?
I would love to have. No, my lawyer took all my money. And so
Better the lawyer than the bank.
I had this coffee and I'm trying to dial it in on espresso on a Monday morning. And I did. 20 grams in, 45 out, 30 seconds, took a sip and thought to myself, oh my God, I have no idea where to even begin. This is so far out of balance. Never struck anything like that. And I'm sitting there looking at a $300 and something problem because I was intending to use this as my feature single origin on espresso for the week. The hell am I going to do with a couple of kilo of coffee for filter when it was a filter roast? And I now say that this roaster, to Marcus at Viking, who I have the utmost respect for and one of my favourite roasters out of everyone I worked with. Like, I have a few favourites, but in terms of doing filter to the essence of the word, I've never come across anybody else who had. And as I've said before, my experience and my segue into roasting was pretty much buying any new or interesting coffee processing technique roaster that I could get my hands on to try it. And so this particular coffee, absolutely undrinkable at a standard recipe, which is no fault of his. It was said that it was a filter roast. I ended up experimenting. I think it took me about 6 goes, and I just went back to the basics of espresso fundamentals. And what I ended up with was a 20-gram dose, 40 grams out, in 55 seconds, which that face that you made was the same face that Cam from Flight made when I was telling him about it. And about a week later, and I said to him, tell you what, I'll try and dial it in again and I'll make you one. And so I did. I dialed this in, bearing in mind that I was dialing this in single dosing on a Mazda Major doser. Absolutely not the right grinder for the job, but it was the grinder that I had, so it was the right grinder for the job. Dialed it in, made it for him, and his response was, "Wow, I would never have thought of going there." And I'm like, well, when you've got that kind of an expensive problem, first thing on a Monday morning, you get creative with your
And look,
solution.
we had I think he won. I can't tell you who it is because I cannot remember. And I think it was in the New Zealand Barista Championships, but it could have been the World Barista Championships. And I cannot remember what year it was. So this is very much a useless piece of information. But we had somebody whose signature drink was a minute 40 extraction of the coffee that he was using. And then it was finished with orange or something. But it was a minute 40 extraction.
Wow.
Right? So you know what? Coffee is not, it's great to have base recipes for things, but sometimes you can find more amazing things when you just play as well.
Absolutely.
I would like to just quickly point out that the podcast I mentioned, It's Just Coffee by the boys over in Australia. And I have partially taken my comment about what Ann Cooper said I haven't taken it out of context, so to speak, but I haven't provided all the context there. So please, if you're interested, go look at that. Go listen to that podcast. I'm almost finished it. I'm really enjoying it. Talking about roasting and guys, that I think is us. It was great to finally get another recording session in.
Absolutely.
Hopefully by the time we get to the next recording session, you'll be rocking in the corner, considering your life choices, and about to throw open Naporo.
I'm about to go and do that now.
With your peach snaps, right?
Yeah, I do, but I do want to finish with one last quote, especially based on that espresso issue, and it's a quote from Mike Finnegan. When you know why the rules are the rules, then you can break the rules.
When you know why the rules are the rules, then you can break the rules. Well, I'm not sure I'm going to agree on that one. But that's also not the hill I'm choosing to die on today. Guys, hey, thank you very much for tuning in, listening to another episode of The Course Grind. We're your hosts, Ethan and Paul. It has been epic. And we will see you on the next one. We're already starting to pull out some ideas for what that episode is going to look like. And we have had a big name in the coffee game throw us a message saying on something that he would love to hear us talk our insights on. So it could be that. Who knows?
But it wasn't strictly high grown or direct transparency.
It wasn't strictly high grown.
You still need to get in touch with us.
I would like to point out here that since we started this podcast, Strictly High Grown has reappeared. All right, so I think we can take responsibility for the fact that he's reappeared. We spoke his name, and he appeared, or she appeared back and started posting again. I believe we've actually tagged them in a few things, trying to get them interested. So we will take that claim, but still, please don't send us the lawsuits. And Strictly High Grown, if you are out there listening to us, look. I can go down, I can buy a blimmin' V for Vendetta mask and a black hoodie for you. Let's get you on the show. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We will just make sure our insurance is up to date. Until the next one, guys, take it easy. Peace.
Awesome. Have a good one.